The holiday lights were tangled again. Marcus laughed, holding up the mess of wires and bulbs like a fisherman with a particularly absurd catch. I swear they reproduce in the storage box. This is definitely more lights than we put away last year. I smiled from the couch, watching him work. 3 years of marriage, and he still made me smile at the smallest things. The way he concentrated when frustrated, tongue pressed against his upper lip. The way his hair fell across his forehead. These tiny details that made up a life together. Need help? I asked. No, I've got this. I'm a professional light untangler. He paused. That's not a real job, is it? If it is, you're terrible at it. He threw a stray bulb at me, gently, playfully, and I caught it, turning it over in my hands. The glass was cool, smooth, painted red. Outside, evening was settling over the city. Our apartment on the 4th floor felt warm, insulated, safe. Marcus finally freed the lights and began stringing them along the window frame. I got up to help, holding sections while he secured them with tape. This was our 3rd year doing this together. Our 3rd year of shared rituals, small traditions, the accumulated weight of a life built together. What do you want for dinner? I asked. Whatever you're making is fine. I'm not making anything. I thought you were cooking. He turned to me with mock horror. A communication breakdown already? On our special light-hanging evening? We could order in. The lights flickered. Just once, barely noticeable. Marcus paused, looked up at the ceiling fixture. That was weird. They flickered again. Longer this time. The apartment dimmed, brightened, dimmed again like something breathing. Storm coming? Marcus wondered, moving toward the window. Then everything went dark. Complete, absolute darkness. The kind that feels physical, pressing against your eyes. The heating system's hum died. The refrigerator's drone stopped. The city's ambient noise, always present, always ignored, vanished entirely. In that silence, Marcus spoke. Do you hear that? His voice sounded wrong. Too distant, despite standing just feet away. Hear what? I fumbled for my phone, my hands finding only empty pockets. Where had I put it? That sound. Like breathing. But not breathing. Something else. I heard nothing but my own heartbeat, loud in my ears. Marcus, I can't see anything. Where are you? I'm right here. His voice came from near the window now. How had he moved so quickly? I'm looking at, there's something outside. Not outside. Inside the glass. Something in the reflection that. He stopped mid-sentence. Marcus? No response. Just that heavy silence, pressing down like water. Marcus, this isn't funny. I heard movement. Footsteps. But they sounded muffled, wrong, like someone walking through thick carpet even though our floor was hardwood. The footsteps moved toward the window. Then he screamed. Not a shout of surprise. Not the yell of someone who'd stubbed their toe or been startled. This was primal terror, the sound of someone confronting something that shouldn't exist. The scream cut off abruptly, like a radio switching off mid-broadcast. Marcus! I stumbled forward, arms outstretched, hitting the coffee table with my shin. Pain shot up my leg, but I kept moving, kept reaching for where I'd heard him last. My hands found nothing. Empty air. Empty space. Then my phone's flashlight blazed to life. I must have been holding it without realizing, and I swept the beam across the living room. Empty. The apartment door was closed, chain engaged. The windows were sealed, they'd been painted shut by the previous tenant and we'd never bothered to fix them. There was no way out. But Marcus was gone. The flashlight beam caught something on the floor near the window. A wet footprint. Just one, as if someone had taken a single step and then vanished. The print was dark, glistening. When I knelt down and touched it, my fingers came away damp. I raised them to my nose and immediately recoiled. The smell was organic, wrong, like rust mixed with something that had been rotting in standing water. The holiday lights were on the floor, arranged in a pattern I hadn't noticed before. Not tangled now. Not random. They formed letters, words, a message. Not alone. Never alone. Something else. The power returned with a surge. Ceiling lights blazed. The heating system coughed back to life. The apartment was suddenly, aggressively normal again. Except for the empty space where my husband had been standing 3 minutes ago. I called his name again, my voice breaking. I checked the bedroom, the bathroom, the kitchen. Every closet. Under the bed. Behind the shower curtain. Places too small for a person to hide, places that made no logical sense, but I checked them anyway because the alternative, that he'd simply vanished, was impossible. The apartment was empty. I was alone. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and dialed emergency services. As I waited for the connection, I noticed something that made my stomach drop, my wallpaper photo. It was from our wedding day, 2 years ago. I stood in front of the officiant, smiling at the camera. But the space beside me was empty. In the photo, I was alone at my own wedding. The police arrived in pairs, which somehow made it worse, the idea that they thought I might be dangerous, unstable, that they needed backup to deal with me. Officer Chen was efficient, skeptical, professional. Her partner, Davies, was younger, more sympathetic. They searched the apartment methodically while I sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket I didn't remember getting, trying to explain what happened. "And you're certain he didn't leave through the door?" Chen asked for the third time. The chain was engaged. I checked. The windows? They don't open. They're painted shut. Chen exchanged a look with Davies. That look. The one that said they were dealing with someone unreliable, someone whose testimony couldn't be trusted. "Ma'am," Davies said gently, "when did you last see your husband?" "Before tonight, I mean." I tried to remember. "Marcus this morning, making coffee." Or was that yesterday morning? Marcus at his desk, he worked from home, something with architecture, designing residential spaces. Or did he work in an office? The details felt slippery, like trying to hold water in cupped hands. "This morning," I said finally. "He was here this morning." "And during the day? Did you text him? Call him?" I pulled out my phone to show them our message history. But when I opened it, there were no messages from Marcus. No messages to Marcus. Just texts from my sister, a few work emails, a notification about a package delivery. "I must have deleted them by mistake," I said, hearing how weak it sounded. Chen was examining the living room, taking photos with her phone. "Do you have any pictures of your husband? Something we can use for the missing person report?" "Of course." I opened my photo gallery, confident now. We took pictures all the time. Marcus making silly faces. Marcus on our vacation. Marcus sleeping on the couch with a book on his chest. But every photo showed only me. Selfies with no one beside me. Vacation photos with empty space where Marcus should be standing. Our wedding photos showed me alone at the altar, alone cutting a single-tier cake, alone dancing in the center of an empty floor. My hands started shaking so violently I nearly dropped the phone. "This isn't right," I whispered. "He was in these photos. I saw them. I look at them all the time." Davies sat down beside me. "Is there someone we can call? Family? A friend?" I gave them my sister Elena's number, and she arrived 30 minutes later. I must have spaced out because I didn't remember the time passing. She burst through the door, immediately pulling me into a hug. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "Marcus is gone. He vanished. Right in front of me." Elena pulled back, her expression shifting from concern to confusion. "Who's Marcus?" The words didn't make sense. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, for her to say she was joking. But her confusion was genuine, total. My husband. Marcus. Your brother-in-law. You've met him dozens of times. Sweetheart, Elena said slowly, you're not married. You live alone. You've been living alone since the divorce 3 years ago. What divorce? From Jordan. It was messy. You moved to this apartment to start fresh. Don't you remember? I did remember. Suddenly, horribly, I remembered the divorce, the arguments, the lawyers, the relief when it was finally over. The first night in this apartment, standing in the empty living room with boxes stacked around me, thinking, finally. Space to breathe. Space to figure out who I am without someone else defining me. But I also remembered Marcus. Meeting him at a bookstore 18 months after the divorce. Our first date at a restaurant with red tablecloths. His proposal on a rainy evening, down on one knee in our apartment, the same apartment where he'd just vanished. Both memories were real. Both were solid, vivid, undeniable. They existed simultaneously in my mind, contradicting each other, impossible to reconcile. I think you need rest, Elena said, her voice careful. This has been a stressful time. Maybe you've been working too hard, spending too much time alone. I haven't been alone. I've been with Marcus. But even as I said it, doubt crept in. Had I been alone? Was I alone right now, imagining this entire conversation? The police left after taking a statement, their expressions a mixture of pity and concern. Elena insisted on staying the night, setting herself up on the couch while I retreated to the bedroom. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand. The bed felt too large, too empty. But hadn't it always been this size? Hadn't I always slept alone, sprawled across the mattress in whatever position felt comfortable? No. Marcus slept on the left side. He liked to face the window. He snored sometimes, a soft rhythmic sound that I'd found annoying at first and then comforting. But the left side of the bed showed no impression. The pillow was unmarked. There was no evidence anyone had ever slept there. At 3 a.m, I heard it. A whisper, coming from inside the bedroom wall. I'm still here. Marcus's voice. I've always been here. You just forgot to see me. I sat up, my heart hammering. Marcus? You made me, the voice continued, muffled but distinct. You needed me. Couldn't bear to be alone after Jordan. So you created me. Every detail. Every memory. Every moment. You built a husband out of loneliness. That's not true. Then why doesn't anyone remember me? Why am I in none of your photos? Why do your memories contradict each other? A pause. You've done this before. Not with me. With others. Phantom friends. Imagined companions. Your mind fills the empty spaces because you can't stand the silence. I pressed my hands over my ears, but the voice continued. I was never real. And now you can't tell the difference between what is and what you've imagined. That's the worst part, isn't it? Not knowing. Never being certain. Living in the space between truth and delusion. I don't remember falling asleep. But when I woke, sunlight was streaming through the window and Elena was knocking on the bedroom door, asking if I wanted breakfast. The voice in the wall was silent. But the doubt remained. Elena made coffee while I sat at the kitchen table, feeling like a stranger in my own home. Everything looked familiar, the chipped mug, the scratched countertop, the calendar on the wall, but also foreign, as if I was seeing someone else's life. I need to show you something, I said. I led her to the bedroom closet and pulled out a box from the top shelf. Inside, wedding rings. 2 of them, one larger than the other. A marriage certificate with 2 names, mine and Marcus Chen. Photos, printed, physical photos, not digital, showing Marcus and me on our wedding day. Look, I said, holding them up. This is real. Physical evidence. Elena studied the photos, her expression troubled. She reached out and touched the marriage certificate, running her finger across where Marcus's name should be. "I don't see a second name," she said quietly. "What do you mean?" "It's right there. Marcus Chen. His signature." "Sweetheart, this certificate only has your name. And these photos." She held up the wedding photo. "You're alone in this." I grabbed the photo from her. It clearly showed both of us, Marcus in his gray suit, me in my white dress, standing together in front of the officiant. But Elena wasn't lying. Her face showed genuine concern, genuine confusion. We were looking at the same object and seeing completely different things. "I need to check something," I said, leaving Elena in the bedroom. The building manager's office was on the first floor. I'd been friendly with Mrs. Alvarez since moving in, and she kept me calm as I explained I needed to see the security footage from last night. She hesitated. Protocol, privacy concerns, but something in my face must have convinced her. The footage loaded on her computer screen. Timestamp, 8:40 p.m., the evening before. The camera showed the hallway outside my apartment, and eventually, me leaving to throw out trash. I returned a few minutes later, alone. "Can we see inside my apartment?" I asked. "No cameras inside units. Just hallways and common areas." But there was one camera I'd forgotten about. The building had recently installed a camera in the stairwell that captured a sliver of some apartment windows when residents had them open. Mine was sometimes visible. Mrs. Alvarez pulled up that footage. Through the narrow angle, I could see into my living room. There I was, hanging holiday lights. Talking. Laughing. Holding one end of the light string while the other end hung loose. Dangling in empty air. There was no Marcus. There had never been a Marcus in the footage. I was alone, talking to nothing, laughing at silence, holding up lights for no one. But at 8:47 p.m. exactly, something changed. A shadow appeared beside me, human-shaped but wrong, too tall, too thin, its edges blurring like smoke. It stood there for 3 seconds. Then the lights flickered and the power cut out. The timestamp jumped. "Technical glitch," Mrs. Alvarez said, and when the footage resumed, I was standing alone in the living room, perfectly still. "Can you rewind that?" I asked. "The part where the shadow appears?" She did. I watched it 3, 4, 5 times. The shadow was there. Undeniably there. Something had been in my apartment. But it hadn't been Marcus. I returned to my apartment in a daze. Elena was still there, worried, suggesting doctors and rest and temporary leave from work. I nodded along, not really hearing her. After she left, promising to return tomorrow, I began searching the apartment. Really searching, not the frantic scramble from the night before. I moved furniture, checked behind paintings, pulled up the edges of the carpet. Near the window where Marcus had vanished, I found something. A loose floorboard. When I pried it up, there was a gap beneath, a space between floors that shouldn't exist, that violated the building's blueprints. Inside the gap, a diary. Old, water-damaged, the pages brittle. The first entry was dated 4 years ago. The loneliness was eating me alive. So I started talking to him. Just conversations with empty air, pretending someone was listening. It made me feel better. Made the apartment feel less empty. Then one day, he talked back. His name is David. He's perfect. Understanding. Patient. Everything I needed him to be. I don't question it anymore. I don't care if he's real or not. He makes me feel less alone, and that's enough. The entries continued, describing life with David, dinners together, conversations, the slow building of a relationship with someone who might not exist. The handwriting became shakier, more frantic. My sister says I'm talking to myself. That there's no one here. But she's wrong. David is here. He's always been here. He exists because I need him to exist. The final entry. David says I should stop trying to prove he's real. That I should stop resisting. The apartment wants to help me. It doesn't want me to be alone. I should let it help. I should let it fill the empty spaces. The diary ended there. I checked the inside cover and found a name, Sarah Mitchell. I searched for her online. Found an article from 4 years ago, woman disappears from apartment, no signs of struggle. The photo showed someone ordinary, tired, alone. The article mentioned she'd been struggling with isolation after a divorce, that family members reported she'd invented an imaginary partner. She was never found. I dropped the diary, my hands shaking. This wasn't about me going crazy. This was about the apartment. Something lived here, something that fed on loneliness, that created companions for the isolated, that gave desperate people exactly what they wanted until it was too late. Marcus wasn't real. He'd never been real. But he'd felt real because I'd needed him to be real, and something in these walls had given me that gift. And now it was taking the gift back. The lights flickered again. Once. Twice. I heard Marcus's voice from every direction simultaneously, from the walls, from the ceiling, from beneath the floor. You understand now, don't you? You made me because you couldn't bear to be alone. And I was happy to exist. Happy to fill the empty spaces. But you're trying to resist now. Trying to prove I'm not real. And that's breaking the gift. That's making me incomplete. What are you? I whispered. What you needed me to be. What Sarah needed David to be. What others before her needed their companions to be. We're the answer to loneliness. We're the comfort of not being alone. You're feeding on us. We're giving you what you want. Is that so terrible? Sarah chose to stay. She chose us over isolation. You could make the same choice. The lights flickered faster now, like a strobe effect. In each flash of darkness, I saw them, figures standing throughout the apartment. Sarah's David. Others. Previous tenants, all with their perfect companions, all slowly dissolving into whatever lived in these walls. I'm leaving, I said. Are you? The voice, Marcus's voice, sounded sad. Or will you wake up tomorrow convinced this conversation never happened? Convinced Marcus is real again? Your mind wants to believe. It's easier than accepting you're alone. The lights stopped flickering. The apartment was silent. I stood there, surrounded by empty space, not sure anymore what was real and what my desperate loneliness had invented. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with every light on, Sarah's diary in my lap, trying to distinguish between memory and delusion. I remembered Marcus so clearly. The way he hummed while cooking. His laugh. The time he got food poisoning and I took care of him. These felt like real memories, solid and detailed and true. But I also remembered the divorce from Jordan. The relief of being alone. The first night in this apartment, unpacking boxes by myself, thinking, this is my space. Finally, mine alone. Both timelines existed in my head, equally vivid, equally convincing. At dawn, Elena returned with a crisis counselor, a woman named Dr. Reeves who spoke in the careful, gentle tones of someone trained to de-escalate. They found me surrounded by torn-up floorboards, Sarah's diary, printed photos spread across the coffee table. I need you to see this, I said, holding up the diary. The previous tenant, she experienced the same thing. There's something in this apartment that creates imaginary companions? Dr. Reeves finished. I understand it might feel that way. But what you're describing sounds like a dissociative episode, possibly triggered by isolation and stress. These things are treatable. I'm not making this up. I believe you're experiencing something real, she said. But that doesn't mean it's what you think it is. The mind can be incredibly convincing when it needs to protect us from pain. Elena held my hand. Please, come with us. Just for a few days. Get some rest, some perspective. Then we can figure out what's really happening. I looked around the apartment. In the morning light, it seemed so ordinary. Just a space. Just walls and floors and windows. How could something impossible live here? But then the lights flickered. Dr. Reeves and Elena didn't react. They didn't notice. Only I saw the lights dim and brighten. Only I heard the soft whisper from the walls. Shoes. Did you hear that? I asked. They exchanged that look again. The look that confirmed what they already believed: I was having a break from reality. The lights flickered again, longer this time. In the darkness, Marcus appeared. Standing in the corner, exactly as I remembered him. Solid. Real. Smiling that sad smile. You can have me back, he said, though his lips didn't quite sync with the words. Stop fighting. Stop trying to prove I'm not real. Just accept the gift. Accept that you don't have to be alone. He's here, I said to Elena. Can't you see him? She looked where I was pointing. Saw only empty corner. Her expression broke my heart, pity and fear and helplessness all mixed together. There's no one there, she whispered. Marcus spoke again. They can't see me because I only exist for you. I was made for you. To fill your specific loneliness. But you're pulling away, questioning, and that's making me fade. Choose me. Choose us. Choose the comfort of not being alone. Dr. Reeves was talking about medication, about voluntary admission, about treatment plans. Her voice seemed distant, unimportant. Because I had to make a choice. Right now. In this moment. I could accept Marcus back. Stop questioning. Let my mind, or whatever lived in these walls, convince me he was real. Live in that comfortable delusion, never lonely again, never isolated. Like Sarah had chosen. Or I could resist. Face the truth of my isolation. Accept that I'd been alone this whole time, that I'd created a companion out of desperation and need. The first option was so tempting. Marcus was everything I'd wanted: patient, understanding, present. Never judging, never leaving, never disappointing. Perfect because I'd made him perfect. But he wasn't real. And somewhere in the dissolving remnants of my ability to distinguish truth from fiction, I understood, if I chose him now, I'd lose the ability to choose anything ever again. I'd become like Sarah, absorbed into the apartment, becoming part of whatever fed on human loneliness. No, I said quietly. Marcus's expression didn't change. No? You're not real. I made you because I was afraid. But I can't keep living in a fantasy. You'll be alone. I know. Completely, desperately alone. Every night in this apartment, knowing no one is coming home. No one to talk to. No one to witness your life. Just empty space and silence. I felt tears streaming down my face. I know. Why would you choose that? Why would anyone choose that? Because it's real. And I need to learn how to be alone before I can learn how to be with someone. I need to face what I've been running from. Marcus began to dissolve. Not dramatically, not with fanfare. Just a slow fade, like a dream losing coherence. As he disappeared, I saw others, Sarah and her David, previous tenants with their companions, all fading together like smoke dissipating. Elena grabbed my arm. You're shaking. What's happening? I'm leaving, I said. I'm leaving this apartment and never coming back. We left together, me, Elena, and Dr. Reeves. As we walked down the hallway, I looked back one final time. Through my apartment window, I saw Marcus standing there. Still visible to me, even from a distance. He raised his hand in a slow wave. Not threatening. Just, goodbye. The apartment door closed, and I didn't look back again. They kept me in a psychiatric facility for 2 weeks. Voluntary observation, they called it, though the distinction felt meaningless. I spent the time in therapy, in group sessions, in quiet rooms trying to understand what had happened. Dr. Reeves was patient. She never dismissed what I'd experienced, but she guided me toward understanding it through the lens of psychology rather than the supernatural. Dissociative identity creation. Maladaptive daydreaming. The mind's powerful ability to create companions when isolated. It made sense. All of it made sense in that clinical, logical way. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the explanation was too clean. Too easy. I didn't mention Sarah's diary, I'd left it in the apartment. Didn't mention the security footage showing shadows. Didn't mention how Elena and I had looked at the same photos and seen different things. Because maybe Dr. Reeves was right. Maybe I'd imagined all of it, the diary, the shadows, the differences in perception. Maybe my mind had constructed an elaborate supernatural explanation because it was easier than accepting I'd had a psychotic break. I didn't know anymore. And that uncertainty was its own kind of horror. Elena took me in after the facility released me. I stayed in her guest room, surrounded by her children's noise, her husband's gentle presence, the chaotic warmth of a family. It helped. The constant presence of others made it harder for my mind to create phantom companions. I started rebuilding slowly. Therapy twice a week. Support groups for people dealing with isolation. Reaching out to old friends, making new ones. It was painful, awkward, difficult. Real relationships were messy in ways that Marcus had never been. But they were real. 3 months in, I felt strong enough to start looking for my own place. Elena drove me around to view apartments, carefully screening each one, making sure I wouldn't be too isolated. "What about this one?" she asked, showing me a listing. "First floor, lots of windows, right next to a coffee shop. You'd have neighbors, activity, people around." I looked at the photos. It seemed perfect. Safe. The kind of place where loneliness couldn't take root. But then I noticed something in the background of one photo. Just barely visible through a doorway, a shadow on the wall. Human-shaped but wrong. "Next one," I said quickly. We found a place eventually. Small studio, 6th floor, in a building that was only 10 years old. No history. No previous tenants who disappeared mysteriously. I signed the lease and moved in with Elena's help, surrounding myself with noise, radio always playing, TV on in the background, anything to fill the silence. I started dating. A colleague from work who was kind and patient and understood I needed to take things slowly. Real dates, real conversations, real flaws and complications and miscommunications. Nothing like the effortless perfection of Marcus. It was better this way. Harder, but better. 6 months after leaving the old apartment, Elena called me. "There's something you should know," she said, her voice careful. "About your old building. The police called me because I was listed as your emergency contact when you lived there." My stomach dropped. "What happened?" "The tenant who moved in after you, they only lasted 2 weeks. Reported hearing voices, seeing things. They left suddenly. When the police investigated, they found the walls torn apart. From the inside. Messages carved everywhere. I didn't want to ask but had to. What did the messages say? Not alone. Never alone. Come back. We miss you." Elena paused. "And one more thing." In large letters across the living room wall, "Marcus waits." I sat down heavily on my couch. Did they find anyone in the apartment? No. It was empty. But the landlord is having trouble renting it now. People tour it and feel uncomfortable. Wrong. That night, alone in my new apartment, I heard it. Soft at first, barely audible over the TV. Scratching at my walls. I turned off the TV. The scratching continued. Not frantic. Not aggressive. Just persistent. Patient. Then, from somewhere inside my walls, I heard Marcus's voice. "I told you I'd wait. I'll always wait. For when you need me again. For when the loneliness becomes too much. I'm patient. I'm perfect. I'm everything you wanted." I pressed my hands over my ears, but his voice continued. You did well. Rebuilt your life. Made connections. But they'll leave eventually. People always do. Jobs change. Relationships end. Friends drift away. And then you'll be alone again. And I'll still be here. You're not real, I whispered. Does it matter? If you need me, I'll exist. That's how this works. That's what I am, the possibility of not being alone, waiting in the walls of every empty space. You can fight it. Build your connections. Fill your life with people. But I'll always be here. Waiting. The scratching stopped. The voice faded. But I knew with absolute certainty that he was telling the truth. Life continued. That's the strange thing about horror, eventually, you learn to live with it. I kept up my therapy, maintained my friendships, continued dating. The relationship with my colleague, Tom, became serious. We talked about moving in together. Normal things. Real things. But always, in quiet moments, I'd hear it. The soft scratching in walls. Marcus's voice, so faint I could almost convince myself I'd imagined it. A year after leaving the old apartment, I got a call from an unknown number. Hello? Hi, I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Amy Chen. I got your number from the building manager at your old address. I need to talk to you about apartment 4C. My mouth went dry. What about it? I moved in 3 weeks ago. And I think something's wrong. The manager mentioned you'd lived there before, that you'd had some kind of experience. I know this sounds crazy, but I'm hearing things. Seeing things. And I found a diary hidden in the floor. A woman named Sarah. And she describes exactly what's happening to me. I should have hung up. Should have protected myself, stayed away from that apartment and whatever lived inside it. Instead, I said, I'll meet you. We met at a cafe near the building. Amy was in her 30s, exhausted looking, the kind of tired that comes from not sleeping. She reminded me of how I'd looked a year ago. When did it start? I asked. The second night. I was unpacking boxes and I felt, not alone. Like someone was helping me, even though I was by myself. I started talking out loud, just to fill the silence. And then something talked back. What did it say? It told me its name. Told me not to be afraid. Told me it was here to keep me company. She looked at me with desperate eyes. I know how this sounds. But it's real, isn't it? You experienced it too. I wanted to lie. Wanted to tell her she was having a breakdown, that she needed medical help, that there was nothing supernatural about the apartment. But I couldn't. Yes, I said. It's real. She almost sobbed with relief. What is it? What does it want? I don't know exactly. But I think it feeds on loneliness. It finds isolated people and gives them companions. Perfect companions that fill all the empty spaces. But there's a cost. What cost? I thought about Sarah. About the others I'd seen fading into the walls. It takes you. Slowly. You lose the ability to tell what's real. The companion becomes more real than reality. And eventually, you just dissolve. Become part of whatever lives in those walls. Amy's hands shook around her coffee cup. How do I stop it? Leave. Today. Don't go back. Don't try to get your belongings. Just leave and don't return. But I signed a year lease. I spent everything on the deposit and first month's rent. I can't just. You'll lose more than money if you stay. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, did you see your companion? After you left? I hesitated. Then nodded. Sometimes. In reflections. In shadows. I hear him in my walls. He's waiting. Does it ever stop? I wanted to say yes. Wanted to give her hope. I don't know, I admitted. I think once it marks you, it's always there. Waiting for a moment of weakness. A moment when you're lonely enough to accept the illusion. Amy left the cafe looking haunted but determined. I watched her go, hoping she'd make the right choice. 2 weeks later, I got another call. From the police this time. They'd found Amy's apartment empty, door locked from inside, windows sealed. Her belongings were there, but she was gone. On the living room wall, written in what looked like lipstick, I choose not to be alone. I hung up and sat in my apartment for a long time, thinking about choices. About isolation. About what we're willing to sacrifice to not feel alone. That night, Tom came over. We made dinner together, watched a movie, fell asleep on the couch in that comfortable, messy way that real relationships entail. But at 3 a.m., I woke up. Tom was gone. He'd left a note saying he had early meetings and didn't want to wake me. I was alone in the apartment. And in that silence, I heard it clearly. She chose me. Sarah chose. Amy chose. Someday, you'll choose too. Everyone does eventually. Not everyone, I whispered back. No? Marcus's voice sounded amused. What happens when Tom leaves? When you're old and alone? When everyone you've built connections with drifts away or dies? What happens when it's? Continue. 12:26 p.m. Just you, in an empty apartment, with nothing but silence and walls? I didn't answer because I didn't have an answer. The truth was, I didn't know if I was strong enough to resist forever. None of us know. We build our lives, our connections, our defenses against loneliness. But there's always that possibility, that moment of weakness when the illusion becomes too tempting to refuse. And that's the real horror. Not that monsters exist in walls. But that we carry our own monsters inside us, born from our deepest needs and fears. And sometimes, those internal monsters are strong enough to reshape reality itself. I turned on every light in the apartment and called Tom, just to hear his voice. Just to confirm he was real. He was. For now. But Marcus was real too, in his own way. Waiting in the spaces between. Patient as stone. The call came on a Tuesday evening, 3 years after I'd left the apartment. I was cooking dinner. Tom and I had been living together for 6 months, successfully navigating the mundane complications of shared space. The radio played jazz. Rain pattered against the windows. Normal. Real. Safe. "This is Officer Chen," the voice said when I answered. "I don't know if you remember me. We met regarding the incident at your previous residence." My hands went cold. I remember. The building is being demolished. Finally. Too many incidents, too many people reporting experiences. Before they tear it down, we're doing a final sweep. And we found something. Something with your name on it. What kind of something? A box. Hidden in the space between the walls. It contains items that appear to be yours. Photos, letters, personal effects. Things that shouldn't exist according to our records. Can you come identify them? I should have said no. Should have told her to destroy whatever she'd found, that I wanted nothing from that place. Instead, I told Tom I needed to run an errand and drove across the city to the old building. It looked different. Condemned signs everywhere, windows boarded up, demolition equipment standing ready like metal vultures. Officer Chen met me at the entrance with a cardboard box. "I have to warn you," she said, "some of this is disturbing." Inside the box, wedding photos that clearly showed Marcus and me together. Not alone like in my other photos, together, both visible, both undeniably present. Letters in Marcus's handwriting. A watch I'd given him for our anniversary. Physical, tangible proof that he'd existed. "Where did you find this?" I asked, my voice shaking. behind the wall where your bedroom used to be. There were others too. Other boxes for other tenants. Sarah Mitchell's box contained photos of her with someone named David. Amy Chen's box had photos of someone called Rachel. Chen's expression was troubled. We can't explain it. These items exist. The people in the photos exist. But there's no other record of them. No social security numbers, no employment history, no digital footprint. It's like they were real only to the people who saw them. I pulled out a photo, Marcus and me on our wedding day, both clearly visible, both smiling. The same photo that had shown me alone when I'd looked at it in my apartment. But this printed version, hidden in the walls, showed the truth of what I'd experienced. Or showed what the apartment wanted me to believe I'd experienced. What does it mean? I whispered. I don't know. But the psychologist we consulted said something interesting. She said maybe these people were real, just not in the way we understand reality. That maybe extreme isolation can create something. Not quite hallucination, not quite supernatural. Something in between. I thought about quantum physics, how observation affects reality. About how consciousness itself might shape what we experience. About how loneliness might be powerful enough to manifest companions that exist in that liminal space between real and imagined. Are you keeping these? Chen asked. I looked at the photos. At Marcus's face, smiling at me across time. At proof of 3 years that everyone insisted never happened. No, I said finally. Destroy them with the building. Are you sure? I need to let him go. Really let him go. As long as these exist, part of me will wonder. Chen nodded and took back the box. As I turned to leave, she called after me. The psychologist said one more thing. She said that companions aren't malevolent. They're just mirrors of what we need. The dangerous part isn't them, it's us. Our needs. Our willingness to accept comfortable lies over difficult truths. I drove home in silence, thinking about mirrors and needs in truth. Tom was still at the apartment, worried about where I'd gone. I held him tight, feeling his solid presence, his real heartbeat, his human imperfections. What's wrong? He asked. Nothing. Everything. I don't know. I pulled back to look at him. How do I know you're real? He smiled gently. Because I frustrate you. Because I leave dishes in the sink and forget to call when I'm running late. Because we argue about stupid things and have to work through problems. Real people are difficult. If I was what you'd imagined, I'd be perfect. He was right. Marcus had been perfect because I'd built him to be perfect. Tom was real because he was flawed, complicated, sometimes frustrating. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in years. No scratching in the walls. No whispers. Just silence and Tom's gentle snoring. But at 3:47 a.m., I woke to find Tom's side of the bed empty. A note on his pillow, couldn't sleep. Went for a walk. Back soon. I lay there in the darkness, listening to the apartment's sounds. And I heard it, so faint I almost missed it. The soft scratch of something moving inside the walls. Then Marcus's voice, barely a whisper. They tore down the building today. Destroyed the physical space. But we don't live in physical spaces. We live in the gaps, between thoughts, between certainties, between what you know and what you fear. You can't destroy us by destroying buildings. We exist wherever lonely people exist. I got up and turned on the lights. The scratching stopped. The voice faded. Tom came home an hour later, apologetic about waking me. We had breakfast together, went about our day. Normal. Real. But now I know the truth, the companions aren't tied to that one building. They're not haunting a specific place. They're haunting the concept of loneliness itself, waiting in the empty spaces of every isolated person's life. Marcus was right about one thing, he'll always be waiting. Not in walls, but in the quiet moments when I'm alone. In the space between connections. In the fear that everyone will eventually leave and I'll be isolated again. The real horror isn't that these things exist. It's that they exist because we need them to. Because loneliness is so unbearable that our minds, or reality itself, will create companions to fill the void. And the most terrifying question remains unanswered: if I'm ever truly alone again, truly desperate again, will I be strong enough to resist when Marcus offers his perfect, patient companionship? I don't know. None of us do. That's why I write this down. Not as a warning, exactly. But as a reminder, the things we create from loneliness are real in their own way. Real enough to reshape our perception of reality. Real enough to make us doubt what exists and what we've imagined. And once you've experienced that kind of companion, perfect, understanding, always present reality can never quite compete. So I hold on to Tom. I cultivate friendships. I stay connected. I fight against isolation with everything I have. Because I know what's waiting in the empty spaces. And I know that someday, in a moment of weakness, I might choose the comfort of illusion over the difficulty of truth. We all might. That's the real horror. Not monsters and walls. But the monsters we build from our own desperate need not to be alone.